Hello, fellow Equatorians. This is Sabata with the EQUATORIA Advocacy Foundation. I'm the director for resource mobilization. Today is July 14th, and I wish you well wherever you are. Over a couple of days, you might have realized that the revitalized transitional government of national unity in South Sudan is implementing policies that are intended to reform the armies. There is disarmament of the armies going on, and you might have realized the Minister of Defense orienting the armed forces, the South Sudan People's Defense Force, on certain aspects of their responsibilities, and this sounded kind of positive. It's good towards reforming armies, and of course this is consistent with the terms of the revitalized transitional or rather revitalized RCs that was signed in 2018 in Khartoum. But fellow Equatorians, while this is happening, the Equatoria Advocacy Foundation would want to bring up to your notice that this is not, it's not fully enough to make you feel as though eventually security is going to be very good and distract your focus from the demand for devolution of powers to state levels. This is not enough at all, because the armed forces for the South Sudan People's Defense Force are adults who are deeply tribalist, and a couple of orientation workshops here and there will eventually not manage to really reorient them fully to become nationalists in character. And for that reason, South Sudan, with all those good orientational talks that the Minister of Finance gave to those South Sudan People's Defense Force, that may not be enough to really change the culture of the forces. As you might have also noticed, that as this is going on, there is an incident that has happened in the defunct state of Lanya, in some of those counties or bombers in the former Yei River state, where some Equatorians fell victims of a very brutal act of some militia, and I called these armed forces militia not to belittle the armed forces, but these are facts. The armed forces of the South Sudan are pretty much armed militia. These are not people who are trained academically to become good national armies. Yes, we might have realized that they went out to the areas of Mukwaya and some of the areas in the former Yei River state and basically looted and raped citizens there, and we have seen videos actually spiraling around, and the Archbishop Yugusuk, Archbishop, how do you call him? Archbishop Paulo, the son of Yugusuk, has been out there doing a very good job receiving humanitarian assistance from various places here and there. So for that reason, brothers and sisters, the EQUATORIA Advocacy Foundation would like to communicate to you that for as much as the revitalized transitional government of national unity is now making these petty steps towards reforming the army, this is positive move. It's not bad at all, as the people of South Sudan, including fellow Equatorians, should receive those steps as positive. However, be reminded that it's not enough. Be reminded that you should continue to uphold to the idea that devolution of powers to states and limiting the authority of central government over the states is the ultimate solution. All right, that is the ultimate solution. And when I talk of devolution of powers to states and also limiting the central authority or powers of the central authority over the states, I'm basically talking about federalism. That is the ultimate solution. And even though you people of Equatoria may not have the choice or the power to have that be implemented for sure, but hold on to that as the ultimate solution for your problems, for our problems, and for that reason, that will give the people of Equatoria to basically be fully matured or aware of where their problems are and what the solution supposedly is, opposed to being less informed of your actual our ultimate solution for our problems. Besides, brothers and sisters, you know, when you call for federalism, federalism, which is basically a form of freedom to you, is a right. All right, freedom is a right that has been declared by the United Nations in what is called the Human Rights Declaration of 1947. It started from 1945 all the way through 1947. You know, federalism is a right. Okay, it is your right. It is a right because it is a form of freedom. Freedom is your right. Let me justify that claim here. All right, I'm gonna read this really quickly. All right, as you can see, these human rights. I'm gonna read this, what human rights are, and you would notice freedom is actually one listed on the top. That it says human rights are rights inherent to all human beings, regardless of race, sex, nationality, ethnicity, language, right to life and liberty, freedom from slavery and torture, freedom of opinion and expression. Now let me connect how federalism is freedom, and it is also freedom of expression, and it's also freedom of giving out your opinion. You know, as I've said, and by the way, you might have noticed that when I was reading, it says here human rights include, human rights are rights inherent to all human beings, regardless of race, sex, nationality, ethnicity. So when you look at how we are politically demarcated in South Sudan. When you look at the region of the Equatoria, which of course comprises of 3 states right now, the Central Equatoria, the Eastern Equatoria, and the Western Equatoria, these people, all right, are Equatorians typically, and those tribes have come together and formed what is called Equatoria. And now Equatoria is a social, it's a social group, and it's a social fact. Now it is of course an identity group, Equatorians. Now Equatorians as a group of people, based on this human rights declaration, have the right to freedom of opinion and expression. Now, how can Equatorians express their opinions and express their opinions freely? This is only when they are not subjected to what is called central authority. All right, and in the 21st century, the only way by which you cannot subject a group of people to a political aspiration that is not originally of them is basically to control them from above, or to subject them on or with what is called a central authority. But the idea of this devolution of powers is basically to give freedom to each and every group of people, be it a particular nationality, be it ethnic group. Give them the right to express their opinions through their local ways by which they want to govern themselves. All right, and instead of having what is called a central authority controlling and injecting agenda of governance over them, you give them the freedom through what is called the federal system. You give them what is called freedom to have their own individuals come together and legislate rules or laws by which they want to live. And as they legislate that, they should eventually then have a mechanism to enforce those powers. And once then, eventually, when we start talking about federalism, then eventually that then brings us to then talk about having our young boys to be the police of the territory, so that they will eventually then be able to enforce the legislated I can call it bills or legislated laws, okay? Because the legislated laws are the expressions of the people. You know, when you are living in your territory, in your states, or those states within the Equatoria, when your legislative assembly members come and legislate laws of the territory that will hold people of that territory, that is basically an expression of how you want to administer yourself, okay? And there shouldn't be any control from above, security of those of Akolkur or pressure from Kir should be limited. And as you design those policies, and of course that is going to include even land policies to prevent what is called land grabbing. As you design those policies cannot manifest in life unless there is also what is called police to be able to apprehend people who are not adhering to the law, you see. So eventually that will then mean that the state or the states will eventually have their own police. And not only that, they also will have their own courts, okay? Because where are the laws being interpreted? The laws are being interpreted in courts. So you can imagine the line of federalism is a separate legislative body, and then police, and then courts. This actually helps manifestation of what is called federalism. So the bottom line is, I don't want to drag you out from the point I'm trying to give you. The point I'm trying to give you here is, brothers and sisters, is that for as much as we are seeing that the the military arrangement and the reforms are going on, that should not lure Equatorians to believe that things are now good. No, it's still far from good. And the ultimate solution for the problem of Equatorians will eventually have to be in the devolution of powers. It doesn't matter even if tomorrow, next tomorrow, we see the behaviors of these military personnel changing, but still we want to see the devolution of powers, because it basically gives you the freedom to choose for your destiny. You want to be free to decide on how you want to govern yourself. And by the way, this is something that is inherently this is your right. This is your right. You are being born with that right. It is a God's given right. It is a universal right. It was simply just declared by the United Nations in 1947. That does not mean the United Nations created that right. No, that right has always been something that is given to you by the Creator. All right. So yes, while the transitional government of national unity is making steps towards reforming the military sector, which is good, but we, the people of Equatoria, must remember that we want the devolution of powers that will come as a package, with the fact that once the devolution of powers comes in, then eventually the limitation of central authority over the states will then be attached. Then eventually the states will then have their own young boys, their own police, and will eventually also have their own courts that will not be influenced by central authority. Okay, that will eventually lay down for the foundation of federalism to start manifesting, or to start working in this way, so that the local governments or the state governments will be able to then deliberate on matters and legislate laws, and the laws will be enforceable, and those who are not adhering to the law can eventually be able to face the courts. You see, that is that, brothers and sisters. And the other reason I would want to share with you really quick, and then I will just end this video session, is to tell you, people of Equatoria, while federalism is a form of manifestation of freedom, which is basically a right, I want you to realize that you, the people of Equatoria, since then, when you guys notice how you guys have lived during the government of the regional autonomy, you have embraced what is called liberty. All right, this is seen from how you have conducted yourself, especially in metropolitan places or cities like Juba. All right, you were able to come together. All right, you are very flexible. You, the Equatoria people, by the way. When you guys came, you those who have basically interacted or integrated in areas like Juba, it was not very hard for these various tribes that comprises what is called Equatoria to melt together and become what is called a melting pot. You see, you are very liberal people. You are not very hard. You don't hold into what is called cultural norms so much. That is why you are able to melt easily. That's why when you were in Juba, you are able to intermarry very quick, very easily. And in the process of intermarriage, and when I'm talking about intermarriage, I'm talking around across tribal line. You did not hold to what is called the cultural norm by which process of marriages are being held. You guys were able to drop some of the cultural norm in order to make diversity possible. You see, and that actually an evidence that you are really very liberal. You are very easily you are easily melting together. Okay. Forming this one huge people or nation of Equatoria. And when you realize even this language, Arabic Juba, you are able to diffuse in many words from your ethnic languages into what is called the language of Arabic predominantly, and you were able to form that what is called Arabic Juba, which basically you were able to interact around when you guys were in the equatorial area, and eventually that language spread around even places like Yei, places like Torit, Pageri, and Yambio, you know, parts of western Equatoria. So you can see how you people of Equatoria easily melt together to form one. So you are basically exercising what was called liberty. So you are culturally very distinct, you know, and because of that, if you are given the freedom to also exercise politics in your area freely without any pressure from the central government, you can see how you will be a very, very progressive society. You will pretty much be moving away, far away from the basic ideas that hold ethnic groups to become tribalist or to exercise activities along tribal lines. You can easily melt together, all right, and form this nation of Equatoria and form this one people, this one group. And of course, the ethnic groups are also important while you guys maintain the demographics of these ethnic groups, but these ethnic groups will not impede or will not hinder you from melting together, because you people are very progressive in way of thinking. I also remember in Juba, you have also embraced certain ideologies, okay, because you are so liberal. In Juba, you've embraced certain ideologies where I can see there are some social groups who call themselves Rastafarians, and the way they behave, they wear those tight pants and kind of baggy shirts and do some dreadlocks and you know, group themselves as Rastafarians. There are those who embrace the Rumba culture, you know, they kind of behave similar to the culture that is exercised inside the Congo territories, you know, and there are those who would eventually exercise, I don't know what type of culture that is, but those guys who like to do break dancing and all these kind of things. So you can see how progressive you people of Equatoria are, and for that reason, you are a very distinct people in South Sudan. You cannot afford to allow yourselves to be basically controlled under a central authority that basically are not as an authority that does not give liberty, that does not give freedom to people. You the people of Equatoria are very distinct. You must make sure that in order to continue to uphold to your uniqueness, your unique principles of liberty and of progressive ideas, you really need that political atmosphere to govern yourself, okay? And once you have that political atmosphere to govern yourselves, you respect yourselves, you will eventually have legislative assemblies within the equatorial area that will basically make sure that they put together rules or laws and make sure people adhere to those laws, especially laws that will manage land very, very carefully, because we also Equatorians, we respect people's properties. You know, we don't, you might have noticed in the equatorial area that even though there are some tribes in the equatorial area who keep cattle, but there has not been any ethnic clashings, because those tribes controlled the movement of their cattle and know that it's their responsibility to see into it that their cattle do not infiltrate on other people's agricultural areas, so that so in this way we can prevent problems and foster peace, you see. So yes, brothers and sisters, fellow Equatorians, I will not take much of your time, but as we are seeing the revitalized transitional government of national unity making good steps towards reforming the armies, this is not enough. In particular, of course, the national security seems to be policing people within even the equatorial territory, and they are very discriminate as they do that because they are very tribalist in nature. So basically, the reforms that are going in the military, in the army, rather, is not effective under the national security. The national security is, of course, under Akolkur, and the Minister of National Security is Mobutu. I don't know what they would be doing in their side in order to improve that administrative unit. But as far as the armies, it looks like the South Sudan People's Defense Force is undergoing some reform, but that is not good enough. That should not lure brothers and sisters Equatorians to think everything is now going fine, and it's now time to start forgetting about devolution of powers. No, we must uphold to devolution of powers. This is a very special demand that we, the people of Equatoria, must uphold really very strong and continue to pursue it by all means necessary in order to get it, because that is our path to freedom of way of life, so that we will continue to exercise what is called our liberty and our pursuit of happiness in the equatorial area without any controversies from other government forces coming from up, or other cultural differences that are brought by settlers who are not originally of the indigenous equatorial inhabitants. Thank you very much. God bless you until we'll come and interact again in another session of a video. Stay safe from COVID-19. It's picking up again. The numbers are growing high. Maintain the instructions that are given by your authorities. Maintain social distancing and wash your hands very frequently, and also keep your mask on when you go to areas where there are congestions. Thank you very much. God bless you.